identify and know what energy was operating under in what way. And they did this by studying the cosmos. Okay?
Well, actually, they were really studying themselves. Right?
Yes, absolutely. As above, so below. Right. Okay. For that reason, it becomes somewhat difficult to discuss ancient astrological lore without also discussing the ancient deities. But while in Egypt, astronomy was not divorced from religion until the advent of the Greeks and other civilizations began to diversify much earlier, what a new breed of intellectuals sought to devote their time to the study of the planets without recourse to theology. To be sure, the planets were not stripped of their divine character, but with the sophistication of mathematics, astrological observation became more of a science in the modern sense. And perhaps in order to keep their astral studies isolated from the higher realm of theology, those novel astronomers bestowed a set of new names on the planets, often chosen to reflect the same ancient characteristics without succumbing to the divine nomenclature. The identity of gods with whatever planet was never lost, but as time went by, the independence acquired by astronomy came close to alienating it completely from religion. That this alienation was never quite realized was mainly due to the theologians, priests, and shamans whose invested interests assured the preservation of the ancient links. It is only among the later Greeks or their immediate ancestors that the planet's identity came near to being forgotten. A tradition has been handed down by the ancient thinkers of very early times to the effect that these heavenly bodies are gods. Okay? We need to understand that. And that represents the energies. And then when we study the planets, then we're understanding the characteristics of those energies. Okay? Because it's all about levels, you guys. We have an individual level, then we have a planetary level, then we move up to like a star level, going up to universal, the cosmos. All of it's representing the same thing, but at different levels. So now we're aspiring to reach up into, a higher level at this time. So what I have been doing these past series is making a connection to Saturn. Saturn and us. Saturn representing our energy. Saturn is the energy that is known as the father energy in the Bible. A lot of people didn't know that. But Saturn represents the sign Capricorn, which represents the paternal, the father figure, the leader figure. And so it also represents the colors browns, dark browns. Saturn is the planet of restriction, obstacles, limitations, oppression. Who does this describe as a people? Us. See, that's our energy. Okay. This is called the Saturn hypothesis. It has been clearly established that early religions were astral in nature, and that aside from worshiping the God of the Old Testament, or the one grand God referred to by Plato, they also worship the planetary gods. That being the case, the three supreme astral deities obviously should have been the sun, the moon, and Venus. They weren't. The two chieftain gods in all ancient religious systems were Jupiter and Saturn. Okay? Zeus and Cronus. That doesn't make sense. Most people would have a terribly difficult time just finding Jupiter and Saturn in today's sky. And they certainly would not rate worship. Could there have been some reason for Saturn worship in the very recent past? Greek authors generally spoke of the antediluvian world as a golden age, the so-called age of Cronus. They themselves were called the children of Cronus. First of all, the immortal gods who had their homes in Olympus created a golden race of immortal men who lived in the time of Cronus when he was king in heaven. Okay? The earth gave forth all good things of her own accord, and mankind, content with foods created without labor, picked the fruit of the trees and the mountain strawberries and the cherries and the mulberries, clinging to the wild thickets and acorns that fell from the spreading oak of Jupiter. Spring was eternal, and the gentle breeze caressed the flowers, all springing forth without seed, with clear warm air. Soon also the unplowed earth was rich with grain, and fields always fertile were white with the heavy beards of corn. Then rivers of milk that streamed of nectar flowed forth. After Saturn had fallen to the shadowy lower world, and some say that means it was no longer visible to mankind on earth, and the earth was under the rule of Jupiter, the Silver Age followed. Jupiter shortened the length of springtime, and through winter and summer, and a changeable autumn and a short spring, that completed a year of 4 seasons. Then for the first time, the scorched air glowed with parching heat, and ice hung frozen by the winds. Then first mankind lived in houses. Okay, but before that we had the golden reign of Saturn. You know, when Saturn reigned, then everything, you know, that's when we had our gifts. That's when our ancestors had telepathy. That's when they could communicate with the cosmos, with the animals, with the plants, with each other. You know, we had those gifts when Saturn was at close proximity to the earth. Okay, but Saturn fell, see, and that represented the fall of man, you know, our fall, which sets up the prophecy of the return of Christ, which is the Jesus story that they stole from, you know, our ancient ancestors. They went in and raided the tombs and stole that story, you know, about the return of the Christ energy. That was Saturn's return that they're talking about. As Saturn returns, so do we return to our power. See? That represents our power. Okay. Yes.
Was there ever a figure of Christ? Was there ever?
And you know what? I got some information that's going to really get into that too. No, I mean there's no as far as historical Jesus.
No recorded history.
No historical Jesus. No.
No historical Jesus. No Mary.
No. See, Mary. That's the Isis. That's the Isis and Horus story.
Okay.
They say when Christianity was first adapted, it was such a paternal religion. They had a hard time getting much participation. So they went and adopted the Isis story and Horus story, which became the Mary and Jesus story. That's what made it popular. See? Isis and Jesus, Mary and Jesus is nothing but the Isis and Horus story. Right? It all come from our ancient ancestors. So,
That's hard. That's deep, man. That's hard to tell millions of people.
Yeah.
It's very hard, man.
okay. The standard interpretation of Egyptian pyramid texts date from the late 1800s. Nobody at that time had considered even the possibility of a different solar system order having pertained just 6,000 years ago quite naturally. All explanations given were in terms of present reality, even though the fit could be seen to be a forced one. Catastrophists claim that all of the various names for the Egyptian chief god originally referred either to Jupiter or to Saturn, but not to our present sun. Let's see. The tale of the Tower of Babel. The tale of the Tower of Babel and of the fragmentation of the original human language is universal and not something found only in Jewish and Christian holy books. Okay. Part of the scripture is Genesis 11, 9. It says, therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Okay. Probably the worst, of one language and of one speech, probably one of the worst possible translations of the original text, but not the best either. An acknowledged expert in Hebrew language assures us that what the verse means to anyone with the slightest familiarity with the Hebrew language is that at the time in question, there was but one language with a very small vocabulary. It says few words. In other words, what is being described is not a transition from one language, such as ours, to many languages, such as ours. What is being described is a total change in the manner in which humans communicated, going from some fairly recent point to the present. Okay? In very ancient literature from the older sections, we search in vain for any sort of reference to anything which we would call decision-making at every turn in which you or I would have to stop and think about how to proceed. The men and women of the ancient times are guided by the voices of gods or goddesses. The entire manner in which the human brain and mind work today is fundamentally different from the way in which they worked just a few thousand years ago. And the evidence appears to entirely support this. In fact, it describes a physic equivalent of a cosmic catastrophe. The manner in which humans communicate could not possibly evolve through such an event. Whatever existed prior to the event and whatever existed afterwards would have to be two separate realities. Okay? Moreover, it is known that the magnetic field of the Earth was far greater than it is now. Okay? We're getting back to the energies, you guys. It's all about energies. Evidence that humans and other higher animals as well communicated telepathically prior to the flood. And the breakup of the electrostatic ability of the Earth to support that kind of communication. It was discovered evidence a long period of time during which the ability to use the human mind in the former manner became progressively dysfunctional, until it reached the point in which you have the prophet Zechariah admonishing parents to simply kill children who persist in using their minds in the old manner. In other words, they killed, the fact that we could use our mind in that manner. They said, the prophet said, don't allow them to do that. Kill children that you see doing that we haven't controlled in that manner. Okay?
What do you mean? I'm not understanding that.
Okay, in other words, it's saying that we communicated through telepathy,
right?
And as we grew more physical,
right?
And our children were still using their gifts because they hadn't been trained or taught not to.
Okay.
Then the prophet Zechariah was saying, when children come out doing that, it's best to kill them. In other words, they were moving. They did not want to see the children operating in that manner. Okay?
In the true energy.
In the true energy, right.
In the present day now, what they're doing now with children.
Right.
They're killing them.
Right, They tell them, imaginary playmates and all this kind of stuff. They squash our creative energies.
Okay.
See, remember, everything works on opposites.
Okay.
And we're in the physical realm now.
Right.
And so what we were doing was transitioning at that time from the spiritual to the physical. See, so at that time they were making the spiritual take a backseat to the physical. So they were squashing everything spiritual until we got to where we are now.
Right.
Okay.
That was before the flood, right? Maybe just a little bit. Like you said, at the time when they were squashing the children, that was just a little bit afterwards. That's just that residual that the children were picking up. So that's why he was saying to stamp it all out, even kill those children that show those signs.
And who was that?
Zechariah.
Why did the prophet say that, though? Why did Zechariah say that if he was supposed to be a prophet?
Well, because I imagine, see, we're moving more toward like this one God theory and all of that, see. So anything, this would be blasphemous, that's going up against that theory. So they're going to try to promote everything that's going to, you know, promote the one God theory. Okay. See? So them communicating in that manner was just, it was too much of identification that, you know, it didn't. They was forcing a theory that wouldn't work. Okay.
So when they got into the one God theory, is that the thing that really, one of the things that crushed us? Because we
Absolutely, absolutely, because that's the reason why we're so afraid to use everything we have now. You know, everything that we do. That's the reason we're afraid to do what our ancestors did. They call that pagan, don't they?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because
They
you're
call
worshiping
it
men and gods,
an
right?
occult. That's what I've been taught. That it's an occult when you get out of the realm in which you're taught in a religious
they call
manner.
that, what is it, monotheism?
Right.
Monotheism.
Right, absolutely.
And that's what destroyed us.
That's what, yeah. That's
It
what,
is destroyed.
well,
See-
yeah, that's what took us more into the physical.
I have a little confusion with that because my confusion with that is with the Egyptian king.
No such thing.
Excuse me, Egyptian pharaoh.
Pharaoh means what?
Okay.
King.
No, it does not. It means house great. Now, you were saying.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name who started the theory
But one God?
of one God. Akhenaten. Okay, that's who I'm
Right.
trying to remember.
That's right.
Okay, and I
They
had,
knew no gods.
Right.
huh?
The Egyptians knew no gods.
That's right.
They knew no God. So, did they believe in?
The Egyptians didn't believe.
They know.
Wasn't in their vocabulary.
They didn't believe.
No, they observed.
Okay. So,
You're trying to look at things way back then in today's mind. Won't work. Unless you go study that mindset back then. And all that you read is just an extrapolation. What's the word that used? An anthropomorphic.
okay.
Okay?
So they didn't have a monotheistic or polytheistic?
No, they didn't have a religion.
Kind of way of
That's right.
life.
They didn't have nothing.
They looked at nature.
Nature, absolutely. Nature
That's
is the
it.
key.
Nature is the best teacher.
Remember when I was telling you about those elements? See?
Okay,
It's all about nature. It's all about nature.
That's all.
So they really, because they, I mean, at the onset, I mean, when you look at history, they either tell you,
When you read books about our ancestors,
right, they tell
written
you,
by the Leucoderm, people without visible numbers.
they tell you polytheist, that there's polytheistic.
Of course they don't tell you that. They had to destroy it.
The basic reality is that ancient communication was almost certainly telepathic in nature.
How else do you think we placed those pyramids on the ground? You think we had cranes and stuff?
And they've tried to use cranes and stuff,
And
and
still can't do it.
still can't do it.
Yeah, they did.
Still can't do it. They've tried everything they know,
Right.
you know, to figure out how it was
How
done,
to place
and they
it.
still haven't been able to do it. Okay? The few words which was spoken of, said, and the words of power notes a connection with the Egyptian god Thoth. Okay? Thoth, yeah, I can never get that right. Thoth. Indicated that there would also have been a certain rudimentary system of vocalized expression in all likelihood for ritualistic purposes and practiced mostly by priests. Okay? The pre-flood world, which Greeks referred to as the age of Cronus, Saturn, which Greeks called the children of Cronus, or nurslings of Cronus, the oral tradition which indicated that humans were able to communicate with the higher kinds of animals before the flood. Suppose that the nurslings of Cronus, having the boundless leisure and the power of holding intercourse or conversation, not only with themselves but with the animal creation, had used all of these advantages with a view to philosophy and conversation with the animals as well as with one another, and learning of every nature which was gifted with any special power, and were able to contribute some special experience to the store of wisdom, there would be no difficulty in deciding that they would be 1,000 times happier than men of our own day. Or, again, if they had already eaten and drunk until they were full, and the power of holding intercourse or conversation not only with themselves but with the animals. All of these, okay, that broke off in a sentence. I don't know where it was going with that. How universally the ancients regarded the age just prior to the flood as such a near perfect state. We have a fairly clear statement that whatever condition had permitted conversation between man and beast perished with or shortly after the flood. And this one is roughly the same time period for the change in the nature of the working of the human mind. Frank Waters' Book of the Hopi cites a Hopi Indian tradition having the first people felt as one and understood each other without talking. People felt as one and understood each other without talking during the time of the golden race, the age of Cronus. All were gentle and obedient to men, both animals and birds, and they glowed with kindly affection toward one another. Science teaches us that the phonetic alphabet arose only within the last 5,000 years or so, because only then did man become bright enough to figure the idea out after having lived and spoken for many tens of thousands of years prior. This is a far better explanation than the truth of the explanation, as far as us speaking telepathically rather than taking tens of thousands of years to build up a vocabulary or just being intelligent enough to do that, see. So that's how they explain it scientifically. This is a 180-degree change in the worldview. This is the reality of the so-called fall of man. There was this, this I got off probably you guys have heard of Dr. Kenya, and he had sent this to me over the email, and it's called An Ego's Gift. This is a story, I'm going to read this. This is a story unlike any you've ever read or will ever read again. In these pages you will glimpse a magical reality and see the potential of an awakened human mind. You will learn the magic and the power of a feel-good state that ancient shamans knew well, taught to them by a mysterious visitor from the stars. Its practice was a way of life and a guarded secret. This lost secret is revealed again. Although this story is fictional, it lives inside each of us as the forgotten memory of a simple truth, a sleeping memory that can be awakened again by a story of power. The hero goes on a vision quest and finds a legendary portal to a higher world. His adventure leads to the discovery of a mysterious lost tribe that long ago ascended to this higher dimension. As their seductive trials unfold through grand visions and out-of-body journeys, a simple but powerful philosophy is revealed, a door to the secret of secrets. When unlocked and allowed in consciousness, this secret has the power to transmute ordinary life into a playground of joy and discovery, a life of full awareness. This story is about this, it's supposed to be this mixed breed. He was supposed to be half white and half Indian. And his father did not allow him to even, relate with the Indians. So one day he wakes up feeling real good, and he makes this little journey to the mountains. And he meets up with this Indian who starts teaching him some secrets of life. And one of the things that, I'm just going to read some of the things that he was telling him that has a bearing on what I'm trying to impress on you guys, because we're going to have to change our whole reality about things. It's all about the minds. We are the creators, and we have to create our own reality. If someone has fed us a bunch of bull, we bought it, and because we bought it, we believed it, we created it. See? So now we have to open up to a new reality and create a new reality for ourselves. A powerful universal law has brought this book and its wisdom to your awareness. You too must now decide if you wish to proceed. The simple truth, like medicine, may be hard to swallow, but once taken, it restores harmony and health. Okay? To apply what you learn will not be easy. In fact, you will struggle with the demon complexities of your mind, possibly for months before you clear the slate of man-made beliefs and opinions. Only then will you reclaim your power. Also, you must be ever more vigilant in your thought. You will learn to control your thoughts by monitoring your emotions. But in the meantime, try to keep all thought on the positive side. If your mind strays to the negative, you will see the effects very quickly. That is, especially since that August the 11th, you know, because our energies are starting to manifest now almost immediately.
That's right.
What we put out there before, it used to take months, maybe years to come back. You lost all connection to what you had put out there, but now we're having almost immediate repercussions of what we're putting out there. Okay? So if you put negative out there, you're going to get it back. Okay? Understand that as an infant, you came into this world full of spirit, wonder, and natural power. If not for outer influences, you would have grown into a strong and powerful being. Anything you wanted could be yours. Anything you wanted to do, you could do. Just imagine limitless freedom. It is a birthright, you know. But unfortunately, because those who shaped our early minds were themselves limited by limiting beliefs, they consciously and unconsciously passed them on to us. This now is the first truth. It is most important. Belief makes things real. It makes reality. Belief is made from thought. There is nothing real that was not first born of thought. Okay? You limit yourself only by the beliefs that you accept as true. This applies to everything. If you don't think that you can have something or even do something, sure enough, it happens and you can't. Okay? He reached down for a twig and he drew two long parallel lines in the sand. This is a river, he said, and pointing. And through the mind of each person flows a river of energy and light. This light is a creative force, and the light is always being shaped by the thoughts and beliefs of that mind. The river always flows, so man is always creating. Always, if his beliefs are limited, then so are his thoughts. And he keeps creating more of the same limited stuff. He drew several squares in the river line drawing. These are limiting beliefs. You see how they restrict the flow like little dams in the river. The more of those you keep in your mind, the more limited your reality will be. We call these negative beliefs. Galen nodded. This is the little boy that he was talking to. The old man had a graphic way of teaching that was easy to relate to. I can see that, he agreed, but how do you get rid of the negative beliefs? It is so simple. So simple, in fact, it is hard to accept. But remember, simple is not easy. It will take some work. Let me return the question to you. How would you get rid of them? Galen was silent, and then he said, I remember some psychology from school. From what I recall, I guess the solution would be to think about it, then talk about it, then that somehow leads to dissolving the problem. Would that work? Rufus shook his head. Rufus is the Indian guy. This is the white man's way. In your society, it is accepted as truth. But no, other than helping to identify the problem, it has little value. In fact, at the level of awareness that most occupies, the more a problem is focused on, the worse it becomes. For then, whatever is focused on intently makes more of the same. Only your head doctor makes progress. Try again, Rufus said, but this time think simple. I'll give you a hint. See a river flowing. See a busy beaver building a dam, blockage, where the river narrows. As the artist who creates this picture, you control every element and every detail in it. What you paint is what you create. Now, how do you get rid of the dam? Get rid of the beaver? In time, the dam will disappear. In a way, you created the beaver and you made the dam yourself, so the beaver stays. Maybe you could divert his attention from the dam for a while, but beavers would be beavers. I'm sorry, but no. That is only a temporary solution. Try again. The only thing I can think of is to paint a flowing river and wash the dam away. Good, said Rufus. And that is the simple solution to ridding the mind of its negative beliefs. Flood the mind with a greater flow of light, the creative energy, and the blockage will dissolve naturally, disappearing back into the energy that made them. But how would you increase the flow of light and energy? Galen shrugged. Here is the simple truth. Just feel good. By finding ways to feel good as much as possible, in as many ways as possible, you increase the natural flow of creative energy. And that floods the dam, taking away the negative beliefs. He saw the light of understanding dawning on Galen's face. All beliefs have a core of emotion at their center. And limiting negative beliefs always grow out of negative emotions, especially fear, guilt, and doubt. These are the three most limiting human emotions, and they cause a majority of human suffering and pain. The natural remedy is to feel good. It raises the level of human vibrations so high it dissolves the very core of negative beliefs.
Would you say the three was fear, doubt,
And
and guilt?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's true.
that's true. You live, if you believe in your fears, you live them.
Yeah.
If you believe in your powers, you'll live that also. We haven't learned how to believe in our powers yet, but we're learning. You know, the spirits are not going to have it any other way. Okay, our ancestors aren't going to have it any other way at this point. Okay, because it's time for Mother Earth to become sacred. Everything that happens to you, everything you experience, is what you made all by yourself. No exceptions. Society seems to teach to the contrary, that you are almost powerless to control your life. That, except for hard work and constant struggle, you have little hope of overcoming the tide of misfortune that besets most men. This is only a belief, and because it is accepted as truth by the majority, it is experienced as reality. The simple truth is the opposite, however. You have complete control of your life, and you have the free will to decide what to believe. Once you decide to think for yourself, to believe what you like, the magic of the universe fills your every choice. Okay? Believe that. It is true. Do you know that most people give away their power? The even features of the old man's face became troubled. So many just give away their first power, the power of choice to others, to friends, to families, to their heroes, and to their God. They let those others choose what is best for them without ever consulting their second power, their own feelings. What you feel comes from the soul, the inner being, and it always knows which choices provide the best outcomes. You will learn more of this later, but for now just understand that influence from other people takes away your personal power. It must be reclaimed by thinking for yourself and by believing what you feel. To take advice is fine, but only if it feels good to you. Okay, and then as they climb up to the mountain, he tells them, we're entering a portal, he said, a buffer between dimensions. See, and that's what we're actually doing. It is a blend of each without being one or the other. You will still see the physical world, but within the portal, your senses will heighten, consciousness focus easily. You soon discover how very powerful the human mind can be. Whatever you focus on becomes distinct and clear. You will see further, hear better, and feel fully what you put your attention on. It is a place of mystery and magic where the power of the mind rules all. And that's what we're teaching in this series, magic. Because we have it within us. Our ancestors have it. They've been trying to give us that information, but we've been too preoccupied with the physical to pay attention to it. But it's there. And all we have to do is access. We don't believe it. That's why it hasn't happened for us. But We're going to start believing and we're going to start using those powers because, as I said, Saturn represents our energy. And that is the Christ energy that is predicted, that is prophesied to return. That represents us. We are going to return to our power of our ancestors. So, all this is by accessing that spiritual realm that we haven't believed in. And when they start making their presence more and more known to us, we're going to start believing. And as we start believing, we're going to start demonstrating our powers here. Yes?
So you don't believe that Jesus is going to come back into Israel on a donkey and he's going to represent the coming of the new Jerusalem?
See, all that is just a metaphor. All that is symbolic, see. It's symbolic of a happening, but you got to understand from the physical, you have to be able to make a physical jump, to the spiritual, see. Because, the opposites are actually the same. The physical is opposite of the spiritual. They're actually the same. They're just coming from different vibration levels. So what you have to do is supersede the physical reality and understand it as a spiritual reality. I'm sure there's some significance to all of what is said there, but it's just a matter of understanding it on a spiritual level. Okay? What we have done, they have made everything too literal. See?
So you said everything is above, so below, and everything is done on the spiritual, not the physical. So I think what he's trying to ask, since there is a spiritual aspect of that, was there a physical Jesus in that element of that understanding of what you just relayed? I mean, I think differently, but I think that's what you're saying.
And in one of the last, I think it was last week or a week before, we talked about that. We talked about the fact that the Jesus story is really a story of a people, okay? When you're thinking on a physical level, you're thinking individual. When you're thinking on a spiritual, you're thinking on a collective, okay? You're thinking on a collective. So what they did is they trivialized the story, by making it about one man, okay, when it was about a people, us, So, Saturn represents crystallization, okay, Christ, okay. That is our energy, That is us coming back into our power, okay, as a people, not as one man.
Right, Christ is, and this is what I have picked up from tapping into the spirit, that a lot of people want to see, okay, they say Jesus Christ as a physical form, but if you really allow the spirit to show you what they're saying when they say Christ meaning the anointed one.
That's
it's
right.
not representing a physical body, it's representing the spirit.
Right.
And that's what they have taught us in religion, as a physical form, like they continue to doing in the media and all
Absolutely.
of this about, Christ, this figure being in the sky, and so, but it's a
Because that's a mean of mass
spiritual.
manipulation. See?
And control.
Somebody has controlled our reality for us. So they have defined our reality. Okay? It's a way to control what we believe so they can direct that belief. Because we are the ones with the melanin. I mean, and you guys know last week I went through the book I showed you. They've already discovered the property. They call it the miracle drug. It cures everything for them. Everything. See? So this melanin is what gives us the fluidity with the universe. This is what the black holes is made of. See? And so this is what gives us our power. See? They don't have that. So in order to have power, to keep their power, they have to control ours. And they do that by controlling our reality. So, they're going to tell us, they're going to give us the opposite of what is actually going on so that we will believe that and we will create that. I know most of you saw The Matrix. That's what that was about. We've allowed someone else to create our reality. Now it is time for us to take back over control of that. And we have to believe in our powers before we can do that. Before we can do that. But they have taught us everything that we need to fear. They're going to denigrate. They're going to denigrate us.
Like the ozone level.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
caused by the freon gas, but the ozone level was closed because of their control in our reality. Now it's opening to get the energy to flow through.
Right, and they're trying to even circumvent that.
Yeah.
You know, because they know what time it is. See, we just gotta find out. You know, and see, and like I said in my first series, you know, I did the demonstration on the Super Bowl, how they did a ritual. See, because they know this. They know this. They're doing rituals, but they're turning us against doing them. They're telling us it's wrong, it's blasphemous, it's pagan, you know, but they're doing them, empowering themselves, and they're using us to do that, you know. The Super Bowl, the Titans, you know, I showed in this book here how Saturn or Set, the great son of the first son of the great mother, the Titan energy, you know, so who was in the Super Bowl? The Titans and the Rams, right? In the city of Atlanta, the city of metamorphosis. So there was no way they wanted us to see that power metamorphose into the Black Hands, the Titans. So they performed this ritual at halftime. They used all the symbols that we should be using. The Great Mother rising up out of the sea, you know.
What does that mean?
They had the drummers come out with round hats on. Okay, that's to show the energies who they wanted to empower. They had Tony Braxton standing up on the what's that,
Mandela.
You know, which represents the universe. And she's all in this white gown with a dove, you know, let's walk hand in hand through this gate together, because they can't get there without us. Now it's time to walk hand in hand, right?
You know, Santana right there.
Yeah, so what they did, they empowered the realms.
He got 9 awards, and she was bankrupt. Now she got a platinum album.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
So still society playing into it.
Yeah, but they're doing the ritual. The Olympics is the biggest ritual there ever was.
Yes.
Did you realize that?
Yeah.
But they need us to do this. That's why they brought Muhammad Ali out there as
Can you
the
imagine
torch.
that?
You know, because they needed the black energy to make it work. See? That's why they had Tony Braxton standing up on that, because they needed that feminine. They got the Great Mother rising up out of the water. They had everything. All the elements represented. They had all the symbolism. Get the tape there. It's one of the, I think it's my second tape. I show the whole ritual, you know, and we point out all those little symbolisms that are ours, that they took from us, that they use, and they're using to empower themselves. And by us participating, we're contributing to our own oppression. You know?
But they're blinded. People are so blinded.
It's time to wake up.
Because with being in Atlanta, I used to live here, and with being here and the twistedness in religion, you know, and not seeing our people progress the way that they should. And a lot of people that's outside of Atlanta in the big cities, and they're thinking that, oh, Atlanta got us together, that, you know, their black businesses own these big buildings. I'll say, no, it's white.
Yeah, right. This is the biggest, I mean, this is, I call Atlanta Armageddon land. Because if you turn Atlanta, you turn the world. Got the deadest people here. You turn Atlanta, you'll turn the world. You know?
So many people being called
in general.
Yeah, I mean, you got the deadest people here. The deadest people here. But this is where it's going to make its turn at.
Yeah.
This is where it's going to make its turn. You know? Because it does represent Atlantis.
Yeah.
And it is all about the metamorphosis. Okay? See, so it's going to turn here. It's going to turn here. That's why I call it Armageddon land, because we do have some dead. I mean, I come from Omaha, Nebraska. You know, I come here, I was like, you know, things, you know, I just, I was like, oh boy, you know, this is going to be hard. So, what I've been trying to express throughout, number one, our ancestors saw, you know, they didn't worship deities or gods. They identified. They observed.
But see, I still have a problem with that. The problem that I'm having, like, I was getting back to Akhenaten, right? They persecuted this man because he believed in the sun, Aten. he called it Aten, and they persecuted him. Well, from what I read, the culture, the Egyptian culture, persecuted him, and they tore down all of his structures and got rid of his city simply because he believed in one God. So my confusion is it that the Egyptians believed in all the deities before his religion, or did they believe? I'm confused with what they really believed in. I'm confused.
You know, it's hard for me to express what they believed in, you know. But as Emiola was saying, nature was the key here. Okay, but the thing is that they identified these energies. Okay, and that's how they personified. They became personified as deities or gods. In other words.
So that's why they tore him down?
That's right, because he was leading us very quickly to where we are now. You understand? They knew better during that time. When he come out with this one God thing, you know, okay, that would have been, I mean, why are we where we are now? Because we believing in this one God thing, see? You understand? So they knew better. There was more people that knew better at that time than know better now. We buy it now. They didn't buy it then. And they knew that was like an infection, something that could create the reality we're living now.
For the one God.
Yeah, that one God.
It could create for the next successor to Akhenaten, and on and on and on. So that's why I had to get rid of that.
They had to get rid of that. I mean, that's really blasphemous, you know? If you can turn it around, if you can look at the opposite, that would have been what was blasphemous. You know, to try to limit the cosmos to just one God. You know?
But just one entity.
Just one entity, yeah. Come on.
They can't reproduce.
Yeah.
So, okay, so this is what I'm learning today, is that, okay, the belief system that, okay, I have been taught in believing in the one God, He.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
The one God, He, which I was brought up on, is a reproducer, which is a female reproduce, so it's a she.
It's always going to be both, you guys. Okay. It's always going to be both.
Okay, because I know in some of my reading that it'll have he and she.
Yeah,
because you need both of them in order to.
You know, what I've been saying throughout is that balancing opposites is creative energy. Anytime you balance opposites, you create power. Male, female, negative, positive, physical, spiritual. All those are opposites. When you bring two opposites together, you create a whole. So it's not like the he, the she, you know, until you put them together. You don't have God until you put them together, because you don't have a whole until you put those two together.
You have to have the complete circle.
You have to have the complete circle.
Okay.
You have to have the fullness.
Okay, so you can't leave one without the other.
You can't leave one out without the other. You cannot create without balancing opposites.
But is there one God that controls all the gods?
What we call that is the absolute. When I started off with saying levels, we have an individual level, we have a planetary level, universal level, galactic level, until the one that composes it all, the absolute.
The absolute. The all.
Okay.
The all.
The all.
The all in all.
The all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is everything.
That's it.
Okay.
And that's neither male nor female, but both.
That's both. It's always got to be both.
Absolutely.
You don't have the opposite. And see, this is what the astrological chart is all about. This is what it demonstrates. This is how all this was revealed to me, just by looking at an astrological chart. Because that is nothing but a chart of opposites. Everything about the chart represents balancing those opposites. Putting those two opposites together. Remember last week when I demonstrated the Aries energy? Aries is the opposite. Okay, this is the horizon line. This is the astrological chart. Okay, that circle, the cycle, you know, the sacred circle, eternity. Okay, this represents the fullness. Of course, these are all the 12 signs. This is the first house. Y'all know we've been through this. This is all elementary. You know, the first series, the second series. Okay, we start here with Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. That's the complete zodiac there. It's all based on opposites. This represents the horizon. This is an individual, or this is the earth. Okay? This circle represents the earth or an individual. Okay? All these energies are in us. Okay? Every last one of them. Where your sun is at is what you came into this life to focus on. You know, that's the Aries part. You know, that's the Capricorn part. That's just your sun sign. What did I come in this life to focus on? Okay? What is highlighted for me? But you also have the rest of the planets represented there by the energies. Because like we said, Mars rules Aries. Okay? Venus rules Taurus. Mercury, or Hermes, rules Gemini. The moon, Cancer. Okay? The sun is what rules Leo. Mercury also rules Virgo. Venus also rules Libra. Pluto rules Scorpio. Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Saturn rules Capricorn. Uranus rules Aquarius. And Neptune rules Pisces. Okay? And each one of those houses represent a part of your life. First house is your house of action. Second house is your house of values. Third house is understanding. Fourth house is your nurturing, your past, your roots, your mother. Your fifth house is your creative energy, your children, your pleasures, your passions in life. Sixth house is your health, healing. Seventh house is your partnerships. Eighth house, bonding. Ninth house, expansion. 10th house is your community or your public. 11th house represents your friends, your groups, your aspirations, and the 12th house is your subconscious. Okay? But every sign has an opposite sign. And I did this demonstration last week. Aries, okay, Mars is the planet that indicates war.
Now why I gotta be war?
That's what the ancestors identified that planet as, demonstrating that energy. Okay?
Okay.
And then the sign Aries is the warrior, which rules your house of personal actions. Actions. You take actions. Okay? Now, the opposite sign of Aries, come on class,
Scorpio.
Libra.
Oh. Yeah, that's what they say.
Libra. Okay? Libra, okay, is the sign of peace. Opposites. War and peace. Right? Now, suppose we just use our Aries energy. We run around here fighting and beating up everybody, aren't we? You know. If we purely operated on our Aries energy, we run around here fighting all the time. Okay? But in order to balance and create a whole, you bring it to its opposite. The warrior for peace. The warrior for justice. See? It's only full when you use it with its opposite. Balance. Okay? It's all about balance. Same token, if you're too peaceful, you won't stand up for yourself. So you have to bring in your warrior energy. And all of them operate under those principles. All of them operate like that. Everything is about balance and opposite. This is the horizon line. Above the horizon line is your public life. Whatever you find there indicates what's going on publicly for you. Whatever you find below your horizon line is what's going on instinctually. Whatever's on this eastern horizon, on the eastern, that's personal. Whatever on this side is social. And all the signs are going to demonstrate that. They're going to demonstrate that. It's all about balance and becoming full and whole. Because like I told you guys before, Mother Earth is trying to become a sacred planet. In order to become sacred, you have to be full and whole. If you leave one of these principles out, you're an aberrant entity. You're going up against the grain of the laws of the universe, which is the laws of righteousness. See? So that's what's happening. That's why the earth is going through this degradation. It's leaving out too many of those principles. It's an aberrant entity. It has to be sacred, it has to be full, it has to be whole before it becomes a part of the universal scheme, which is the laws of the universe, which is the laws of righteousness. See? And as each individual brings about their fullness, they're contributing to the fullness of the earth. See? Mother Earth is in the process of becoming a sacred planet. And we have to help that along. Because the spirit has to have a physical vehicle to operate through.
And it's becoming a spiritual vehicle because of us are interchangeable. Like as we become whole, that creates the earth to be whole, or as the earth becomes whole, that creates us to be whole? Or is it a
That's a good question.
Oh, okay. As above, so below. It's happening both ways, okay? There's been an influx because as I've been teaching in my class, this is what we call the fixed cross. You have different, okay, the fixed signs of the zodiac are Taurus, opposite Scorpio, and Leo, opposite Aquarius. Those are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. Okay.
What do you mean fixed? As in what?
Fixed is, okay, we have 3 crosses. You have your mutable cross. These are the signs, these are the ones that have flexibility. They adapt.
Okay, gotcha.
They adapt.
Right.
Then you have fixed signs, they're inflexible, you know. Then you have the cardinal signs, which are the leader signs. Okay. That's where we're trying to reach to the cardinal level. See, I had some material I was going to read today called the Cardinal Cross. See? Okay. And but the fixed cross is where we do our reversal. See, we've been on this mass rotation, the physical rotation. On August the 11th, 1999, all the planets were lined up in the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. So that created what you call this fixed cross. And as I showed y'all last week, that created nothing but opposition energy and friction energy, because the same moles are at a 90-degree angle, which creates friction. Okay. See, there's different angles that energies react, you know, they interact, that causes different vibration rate phenomena. And what happened was when all the planets were lined up in those 4 fixed signs, we had nothing but opposition and friction going on at that time, which represented the reversal. It signaled a reversal. I even read it out of the Bible. They had it represented in the Bible. They talked about it, but they talked about the lion and the man. And they talked about the oxen and the eagle. Okay? They were talking about that fixed cross because that represented the reversal of the energy rotation from the physical to the spiritual. So now the physical is taking a back seat to the spiritual.
Right.
I find that there's a lot of astrology in the Bible.
It's the book of stars. That's what it means.
Yeah.
It's the book of
You
stars.
have to
We've been reading it literally.
Yeah.
We haven't been reading it symbolically. And this is what my classes are about, is understanding symbolism.
Yeah.
See? Because once you start understanding symbolism, you're getting into a spiritual language, a universal language. And you're not tied to the literal details, you know, which keeps us grounded and hung up, you know, and makes us not see the whole picture or the full picture. See? So once you start understanding symbolic meaning, you won't be able to look in that Bible without seeing, you know, a whole new message. I mean, you know, it's like you never even read it before. Because you've been reading a little storybook, a little children's story.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? It's time to grow up now.
Yeah.
Energy says it's time to grow up. Our ancestors are coming back, and that prophesized, you know, Christ's energy.
Yeah.
That's returning. Like I said, Saturn represents the crystallization. And Saturn, Christ, crystallization. And I keep going back to Saturn. I know you new students, y'all don't understand what I'm talking about, but I built this up You know, I did a 7-week course before this, and this is the 4th one of this. And I have shown you that Saturn, our ancestors looked at it as the chief deity. That's why I read that paper about how we had telepathy. We had all our gifts when Saturn was at its close proximity to the Earth. Saturn is actually the creative energy of the Earth. It's the father energy spoken of in the Bible.
So is that why, okay, like you're, when you try to tap into certain energies, and because it's not coming together like that, it's like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And see, what, you know, another thing, you know, like this like you have your natal chart, and when you do a chart, you're going to have, and that's in the Bible, a circle, a wheel within a wheel.
Yeah.
Okay? See, you'll start understanding this stuff when you start understanding some symbolism. That's nothing but an astrological chart. This represents your natal chart, who I am. And the outer one represents the transit planets, what's going on in the sky today. And as they circle, they're interacting with your internal planets or energies and causing certain angles, causing certain vibrations to happen, see. In other words, if I'm too focused on my warrior energy, a transit planet will come around and activate that peaceful side, make me deal with that. Like I said, whatever your sun is in is what you're focusing on. Okay? I'm a Capricorn. So I come into this life to focus on, that's the administrator, you know. So, you know, if I'm so focused on administrating, that's what I'm going to focus on. That's what I'm going to deal with most. So I'm going to be naturally comfortable dealing with. But I have to become full and whole. So I can't just deal with my Capricorn energy. I have to deal with all this energy in me in order to become full and whole. So the first thing you want to look at, the maximum way to balance yourself is to look at the opposite, which is Cancer. See? And see, Capricorn is an earth sign, Cancer is a water sign. Capricorn is going to be practical, so Cancer is going to be emotional. So if I'm sitting up here being too practical, I have to pull in my Cancer energy so I can be more emotional, and vice versa. See? But that's how you balance, you know. And then there's other angles, you know. There's what we talked about last week, your sextiles, when they're at a 60-degree angle. That's excitement between the two planets.
Say again?
There's a 60-degree angle where, say, you know, one of these, like I said, say my sun is sitting right here. And that's in, let's say that's in Virgo. Okay? If one of the transit planets come around and it gets into the sign of Taurus, say Neptune, Neptune represents spirituality or deception. And it gets into Taurus, those are two earth signs. They're at a 60-degree angle.
So what happens?
So that means there's excitement going on between those two planets. You know, they're at an angle that creates excitement. So, like I said, Neptune represents spirituality, and then your sun represents what you are at heart. So in other words, it's saying that there's some spiritual issues that's causing some excitement with what I feel at heart.
Oh, okay.
Because they're operating at an angle that creates excitement.
What if your Neptune and your sun are conjunct? What is that?
Yeah, they're locked together. That means it's like they're walking hand in hand, doing the same thing, feeling the same thing. You're in sync.
Okay.
You're in sync. You're in tune with one another.
Both of them are in the first house.
In the first house?
Yeah.
Wow.
What if you just... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Going back to what you were saying about Saturn, how does that relate to, as it says in the Bible, let us make man? Do you know what I'm saying?
Say again, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah.
You know, you were saying that Saturn was our father.
Mm-hmm. It's the father.
It's the father principle. Or,
Right, father principle.
so trying to understand the Bible in a different outlook, how would that coincide with the Bible said, let us make man in our own image, using the Saturn principle or understanding? Is that
It's okay. Well, yeah. You know, it's the same as we keep saying, as above, so below. Okay, we're talking about planetary energy. That's going to make. We represent the energy.
So we're trying to bring Saturn back into our lives, right?
Yes.
So how does that relate in terms of let us make man? And
See, Saturn, okay, everybody knows Saturn gets the bad name. A new look at the old devil. You know, it's the one, ooh, you hate Saturn. When you see astrologers see Saturn affecting something, you know you're going to be restricted, you're going to be limited, you're going to be... Actually, what it's representing is the alchemical process. Alchemy, okay? Alchemy is turning what is base into what is gold, or what is physical into what is spiritual, okay? It's a process. It's a process that you have to... We're under a ray. The earth is under a ray called harmony through conflict. In other words, you bring out the best by meeting your challenges. And that's what Saturn... Wherever you see Saturn in your chart, that's your life challenge.
So
That's
basically, it'd be like a war going on.
It's trying to purge.
It's like a good thing.
It's trying to purge out those things that, you know, it's going to challenge you in an area that you need to purge out of, that you need to come to some awakening. It's going to challenge you so that you can overcome. And once you build your muscles by overcoming where you're challenged at, that opens up, you know, that opens up for you.
But
Yeah.
is that going to be a whole Saturn experience for the whole planet, or just individually?
For us
each
as melanated people,
Collective.
Okay.
as collective melanated
At the
people.
same time, or it's all going to be just different times for each of us?
No, it's, I mean, it's all, I mean, it's
According to
affected.
who in tune?
Yeah, that's right. It's how
Okay.
you tune into.
Yeah.
You know, it's what you tune into. It's how you use those energies.
Right.
How you learn how to identify those energies and use it to your best advantages. I mean, you know, you'll understand that when Saturn is creating a challenge somewhere in your life, then you have to figure out, you know, why that challenge is going on a spiritual level,
Right.
and understand how to balance that energy. You know, how to make it work in a creative way.
But if it's in your natal chart, you will have to be, if your Saturn is in, let's say Mercury, Virgo, will you have to deal with that Saturn or that challenge for the rest of your
Oh,
moment
no,
of
no,
life,
no.
because it has to be your
Saturn return,
challenge in your chart? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
no, it's just, okay, see.
If Saturn is in your house with Gemini,
Okay, I hear you. This is the first sign of the zodiac, Aries, right? Okay, Aries represents new beginnings. Okay, Pisces represents completion. So what happens, everything is cycles. It's all about cycles, okay? So what's going to happen is, say Mars starts going around and challenging, you know, and that's the aggressive energy, okay? So it comes around, you know, and it's going to form different angles, because what the planets are, the transit planets are trying to get you. Don't ever say this is the way I am. This is the way I've always been. Life is about change.
For
You
real.
stop changing, you stop growing.
Yeah.
That's death, okay? So this is all the planets are doing. They're always creating different angles and creating different issues for you to deal with. You know, some of them are good, some of them are challenges. Either way, you're going to grow. You're either going to, you know, take advantage of the good angles, and you're going to overcome the challenges of the angles that's going to cause the friction. And as it makes it cycle, it's going to form those different angles, causing you to grow. And as it comes around to Pisces, it's going to complete a cycle. Okay? Then it starts the new cycle in Aries, new beginnings. But you move up a level now.
Right.
You understand? You're going to still be dealing with the same issues, but you've moved up a cycle. See? And that's the secular. I mean, we're always going through the cycles, the circular, the sacred circle. That's what the sacred circle is about.
How many years does it stay? Because I remember Saturn return is around 28, 29.
29,
So I'm 29 now.
29
and
now.
I've seen I have Saturn and Moon conjunct with one another, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
You're at your Saturn return.
okay, so that means in order for me to be my Saturn return, and everybody has it, that means that the planets stay in each sign for a certain amount of years, and then it goes back around, and how does that
Right.
work?
Each planet moves at its own rate of pace. You know, like I said, the moon is the fastest moving. That's why it's the emotions.
Oh, each one has its own.
On its own rate. See, and the closer the planet is, the more readily you see its influence, okay? Like I said, the moon is the closest, so that represents our emotions, because you see that changes, you know. And then the sun, it moves 1 degree every day. And they all go 30 degrees in a sign. And once it goes 30 degrees, then it moves to another sign, see, till it makes that complete cycle, okay? So, yeah, everyone, and then at the farther
Some go
out,
fast, some go slow.
yeah, the farther the planet is out, the slower it moves. You know, like I said, the moon is the fastest, then the sun, then you'll see Mercury, then you'll see Venus,
How far
then
out?
Mars, then Jupiter, then Saturn, then Uranus, then Neptune, then Pluto.
Okay, Saturn, for example. How long would it take if it calculates that? How long does Saturn move in each short house?
It's you know, you would really have
Oh,
to.
you have to look into
Yeah,
it.
I think I calculated it before. I think it's something like, I'd say about 2.5
Okay, I got
maybe
it.
years in each
Okay,
sign.
okay.
Yeah.
Question with the Saturn, you said we were at the planet was at the Saturn or closer to the Saturn?
At one time.
At one time?
Yeah.
When is that supposedly going to come back around in a cycle to meet us back at another, being close to the Saturn again?
Well, I mean, from what I've heard, it's happening already, you know. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine had told me a few months ago that they did do a special where they said Saturn was as close, you know, as it had been since,
Okay.
you know, that it is closer now than it has been. You know.
Okay.
Do you believe in the 12th planet?
Believe.
Well, do you know of a?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard of it. Sure. I mean, you know.
What about you?
28.
I'm sorry. I'm moving into my eldership, so.
So what's the opposite of Pisces?
Pisces, Virgo.
Virgo, and what does Virgo mean?
Virgo represents the health. It represents service. It's the worker sign. It's the one that's always meticulous about details, you know, every little detail. Whereas Pisces represents the subconscious. In other words, it obscures the details, you know. It's like, you know, it's the dreamland, you know. It's Neptune rules it, which is spirituality or deception, you know. Anything that's obscured, anything that's unclear, you know, that's probably that's Neptune or Pisces influence. And so the meticulous details of Virgo, okay, of course they're necessary, but you can't just always attend to the details, you know. Sometimes you're going to have to let go and have a few faith in the spirit, you know. What's going on spiritually? Do I have to break down everything? You know what I'm saying? Sure, the details are important, but at one point you have to let go and go into, you know, like a faith, you know, attitude that Pisces represents. Okay. See. So each one will work in its opposite like that. See. Okay. Taurus represents growth, and Scorpio represents death and rebirth. Okay.
What about Sagittarius and Gemini?
Sagittarius, and see, we're in Sagittarius right now. You're going to see a lot of friction because we're in Gemini, which is its opposite sign.
Okay.
And Gemini represents education, it represents communications, it represents facts, you know, and where Sagittarius represents the philosophical meaning behind those facts. In other words, we take that information and we give it a deeper understanding, you know. It's wisdom. Sagittarius represents wisdom. Whereas, yeah, and see, the sun is in your opposite sign, which means that it's like it's in opposition.
I
Yeah,
have to deal with the communication.
you're gonna have to deal with the details.
Oh, okay.
The small little communications, information, finding the facts. When that's something you don't really like to deal with, you want to, hey, I'm ready to go in straight into wisdom or philosophical thinking, but but the sun is going to be highlighting those facts and information. You
Crawl
know?
before you go.
Yeah, got to crawl before you walk. You know, but you don't want to do that. Because see, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, which is the great expander. Everything it touches, it enlarges. See? You know, so and people love to see, say, Jupiter come around and sit on top of their Saturn, their Venus, because Venus represents money. It represents love. So if you got Jupiter coming around and sitting on top of that, that means a whole lot of love or a whole lot of money. See, so everything Jupiter touches, it expands on. Okay. So I have a Sagittarius Mercury, our minds. Mercury represents your mind. See, each planet represents a part of who you are. See, and Mercury represents how you think. I have a Sagittarius mind. Okay, so I think like a Sagittarian. Okay?
So wasn't Sagittarius and Pluto or something recently? Or was it something with Sagittarius and Pluto?
Yeah, Pluto is in Sagittarius right now.
Oh, okay. So expanding on death and transformation.
Right.
Okay.
You know, the Earth, like I said, is in a transformation process, especially when it comes to spiritual wisdom.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been enough about 8 more years, right? Pluto and Sagittarius, about 8 more years.
Probably because, you know, Pluto is the slowest moving of all. As a matter of fact, it takes Pluto about 275 years to make a complete cycle.
What about what they say now about us being in the year of the Aquarius?
Yeah.
What's going on with that?
Yeah, well,
Cycle.
yeah, the cycle.
Or the great year. The great year is how many years long?
Yeah, it's
The
they
great
say,
year is how many years long? you
Yes,
think?
that was my question.
okay, they say
I don't
that it'll be about another 150 years before it's complete. Right now, there's overlap. You know, we Pisces and we're in Pisces now. See, when we're talking spiritual, we're going the opposite.
25,000.
We're going the opposite of the physical. Okay? So physically, we would look at from Pisces to Aries to Taurus to Gemini. But when we're talking spiritual, we're going the other way. Going from Pisces to Aquarius. See? So that's what we're moving. It's like we're in an overlap now. We're in the half.
Really?
Yeah, part in the Pisces and part in the Aquarius. But what Aquarius represents, now see, this is where you get, Pisces is where you get religion.
Okay.
That's where you get mass manipulation.
I believe.
Right. That's where you get mass manipulation. That's where you get deception
Oh yeah?
and misconceptions going on.
But guess
Yeah,
what
that's
Aquarius-
Neptune. Yeah. Now,
But guess what Aquarius means?
that's what I was getting ready to move into. But now that we're moving into the Aquarian age, that's individualism. In other words, we go within, we find our own godhood, and we come back and bring that to the table, you know, to make a whole.
I know.
Yes, I know. We
know.
we understand our own unique gifts. See, Aquarius and Uranus represents what is different, what is unique. You know, and so that's what it's going to say. It's going to say we're not talking about mass manipulation anymore. We're talking about individuals going in and finding what they know about themselves, you know, and what are my gifts, and how can I bring these gifts to the table to make a whole. See? Everything is going to be about a whole. When we're talking physical, like I said, we're talking individual, okay? And now we're moving into the spiritual, which means we're talking a whole. See? So we have to go back to what our ancestors believed in. You know, they believed in the community. You know what I'm saying? If it didn't promote the community, it didn't have no place there. See? It wasn't like now here, you know, where the Western way, where it's all about me, me, me. See? Now we got to go back to that attitude.
Well, because the society is not a spiritual society, what happens with them? Do they disintegrate or?
Yeah, I mean, they're going up against the grain. See, the more you continue to resist, see, the prominent energy now is going to be the spiritual energy. See, so we got to do a reversal. This is what I started talking about, that fixed cross. That represents a reversal. So now we have to do a reversal. See, not just a change, a complete reversal. And the more you resist, the more you're going up against the grain of the influx of that spiritual energy. So it's a friction. It's going to create a degradation, a breakdown. See? That's what you're seeing with the weather phenomena. You know, that's the elements, getting back to nature. You know, that's how Mother Earth is going to demonstrate it. Now see, because like when I talked about that fixed cross, it started on August 11th, which would have been the Leo energy. Leo is the fire sign. So we saw things happening that dealt with the fire or the passion. This is when that John fiasco went down, okay? Because Leo represents the rulers. It also represents children. It represents your creative energy. So what happened was that represents the physical child of the rulers, okay? And that's why he had to come down. That's why he had to come down, see? At the same time,
Kennedy.
Oh.
John Kennedy, yeah, the Kennedy,
Oh,
the physical ruler, you know, the child of the physical ruler.
Okay.
Okay? And that's what the Leo energy. And so It represents, and for us it represents passion, for Mother Earth it represents fire, okay? So we saw a lot of fire, it was heat waves going on. You know, there was fires, there was all kind of fires going on. That's what we saw happening on the Earth when it started in Leo. The next fixed sign it moved in was Scorpio, which is a water sign. That for us is emotion. So we saw a lot of intense emotional things happening in public. People going off on the trains, and, you know. But for Mother Earth, it meant floods and rains and water. See, and then the next sign it moved into was Aquarius, which is air sign. So for Mother Earth, that was tornadoes. As a matter of fact, the last tornado, where it hit that black town, that white town, the sun was in Aquarius.
Really?
So that was the air sign, tornadoes at war. See, because the Mars had moved into Aries, so it was like tornadoes at war.
Well, what had moved into where?
Mars.
Okay.
Mars had moved into Aries.
Okay.
Tornadoes at war. And then we saw the air, the tornadoes and stuff. But for us, for man, it represented technological disasters. You saw a lot. There was a lot more computer problems than they even let you know about. Okay, that's because that was representing the third leg of that fixed cross. Then the last leg was Taurus. You know, that's the earth sign. So we saw physical things happening. A lot of health problems. Earthquakes started, you see. So what you got to do is be able to equate on a physical level and on a spiritual level. So that was the physical manifestation of, you know, the earth being going against the grain of the influx of that reversed energy. So as it reverses, you know, it's causing that agitation, you know. But that's only, they call this the cross of purging and suffering, you know, because this is where you expose those areas, the weakest part. Because we're getting ready to move into a new paradigm, you guys. And those who don't move into that new paradigm are going to suffer the repercussions of resisting the prominent energy. See?
Is that where they got the cross from? The regular cross? Christ?
Yeah, you know, and the very first video, the first one I did, I had a video I showed where the Hopi Indians had showed where the Creator, what they said, the Creator gave man the sacred circle, okay? And he said, as long as you live by that sacred circle, you will have peace and prosperity, okay? The white man took it and said he was going to investigate it. He came back with the cross. And that's when they conquered the land, the sea, and the air. They had World War I and World War II. And the Hopi said, if we don't go back to the sacred circle, annihilation. See? Yeah, so...
What do you mean by paradigm, though? What do you mean?
We're moving into a whole new consciousness.
Okay.
You know, a whole new reality, yeah. A whole new consciousness. We're getting ready. And I had some of it. I was going to, but I guess I did have some material here that was talking about that too, where he was talking about, let me see if I can find that.
The dolphins are becoming more prominent now in the scene.
Oh, and I was just reading some stuff about the dolphins
You know the
too.
dolphins?
Oh, here it is. This is called the Leading Edge interview with whoever John Darvalo.
Oh, I got that.
Fourth dimension is upon us. Okay? And he says we're moving into a whole new, it said, I feel everything is a dream. It says, do you feel that our society is going to crumble fast, or can the coming fourth dimensional shift be smooth? He says, I feel everything is a dream. It's all light, and it's what we think it is, whether we're conscious of it or unconscious of it. If we come together in our hearts enough, we can change the dream and lessen the violence and pain that could happen during the transition. If we were completely together as a planet in love, this transition would be one of great beauty. It would be one of the most beautiful things you ever imagined. So this whole paper is about us moving into a whole new paradigm or new dimension.
Is it online?
Yes, it probably is. Yes, online. I see it, yeah. Let me see what it says here. HTTP www.spirit, I can hardly read that, spiritweb.org backslash. Look how small that is. Backslash spirit, fourth dimension, hyphen, what's his name? Melchizedek? Melchizedek, okay? .htm.
He's been doing a lot of studies in that.
Yeah. The fourth dimension is up on us. So he talks about that. We are moving into a whole new paradigm, guys. And we got to be ready for it, because if we're not, we're going to go down with the ship. See, we're going to go down with the ship.
Okay, focus on that.
And see, all this is coming back. Just in here, this magazine, African Magic, see, Manhattan style. I was going to read this to you. This guy is actually doing his rituals. He's actually, he's got the attention because he's doing a lot of rituals, and they just can't, they're going into different portals and all, All this stuff is opening up to us now, like it never has before. We are seeing more, I know you're hearing people talking about spirits more. You're hearing more, you're seeing more, you're feeling more, It's been there all the time, but we've been preoccupied with the physical. But the spirit now say, okay, I'm not going to be ignored anymore. If you ignore me, you're going to pay the price, Because this is what's bringing now. But this is our forte. This is where we empower ourselves at. The white man is the material king.
Yeah.
We're the spiritual kings. So we're moving into our power now. All we have to do is recognize it, believe in it, and access it.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be about setting up our altars today. So because this is this was astrology, the basics of energy empowerment, part 2, the ritualistic practice. See? So now we're getting into the phase where I'm telling you, I want to tell you about setting up your altars. How do I set up my altar? How do I willfully participate in directing those energies? That is our forte. Okay, that's what that's what they want to keep us blinded to. Because once we start, directing those energies, they're really through then. They're through anyway, but, once we start recognizing that they can't use us to keep ourselves in oppression. So now it's time to start accessing that spiritual information. That means accessing the energy of our ancestors. That means setting up your altars, doing your rituals. That means looking at the moon cycles. What is the sun? Right now, what I say about the sun, that's where the energy is focused at. Right now, the sun is in Gemini. So right now, what the energy is focusing on is understanding. It's time for us to come to an understanding about this. See? And so you're going to start understanding a lot more. See? Everything that happens now, after that August 11th fixed cross, is going to have more of a spiritual connotation. We're not in a physical war anymore. It's a spiritual war now. Okay? See? So now we're talking about spiritual fire. We're talking about a spiritual earth. We're talking about spiritual air. We're talking about spiritual water. Water is the element of the soul. See? That's the element of the mother. See? And that's opposite Capricorn, which is the earth, the element of the father. Opposites. You're going to find everything breaks down in the opposites. Everything. Okay? And once you start learning how to balance those opposites, that's the maximum way. That's the only way to create, is by balancing opposites. That's the only way to create. And only we have the power to do that, because we're physical beings with spiritual access. And that's because we have the melanin. See, how do I set up my altar? Okay, I'll go ahead and get into it. I'll get into that. Let me see. Page 52. Your magical wish spell. Now that we have gone over all the elements, we will go over them all together. When you are putting together your spells, you might want to use these pages as a checklist to be sure you have not forgotten anything before you begin. Okay, like we were talking about elements, air. Number one, air. Incense. Okay, so you know for your altar you're going to need air, incense. That will represent the air. Incense with a scent corresponding to the purpose of your ritual. Okay, and that's why I've been identifying the planets and the energies and what they represent, the signs and the energies what they represent, because now that you know air, what's the air signs? Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So when you know what applies to those signs, then you know what element to activate for whatever your purpose is. See, if I want to come to some understanding, then I'm going to use the candle that corresponds with the color that represents air. I'm going to make sure that that the sun is in an air sign, preferably Gemini if you want to really understand some things. If you want to get some equality and partnership, then you'll go to Libra. If you want to get some evolutionary changes, you'll go to Aquarius. And you'll use that energy. You'll focus on that energy when you're doing your ritual, okay?
What about Aries?
Aries is fire.
So when you try
That's
to
red. You want to, and wear the colors. Okay, when you perform a ritual, put on the colors of the element it represents. If you want to, when you do your ritual, wear red all day, because that vibration is going to follow you, okay? So that's red. That's when you want passion. That's when you want love. That's when you want protection. That's when you want...
sex?
Absolutely. Because you know what? Mars is the sexual energy. Everybody thinks it's Scorpio. And the only reason why they say Scorpio is because each sign represents a part of the body. And Scorpio represents the genitals. Okay? That's why people think, and plus it's a sign of intensity. And anything you do with intensity. It's a water sign, so emotional intensity.
Okay, I got
So, but the real sex sign is Aries. Because it's ruled by the sexual planet Mars. Mars represents your oomph in life. It also represents your sexual energy. And the planet and the sign that represents that is Aries. So you're absolutely right. If you want better sex, or if you want to do something with, then
But I feel like a lot of sexual energy, but a lot of spiritual energy too. How do you
see, Aries is the manifestation. It's the first manifestation of this book, Esoteric Astrology, Alice Bailey. Okay, it fascinated me when I read about the Aries energy, because it it really identified. It's actually the manifestation, the first manifestation of. Let's see. Here it is, Aries. Strictly speaking, let me see if I can find a spot that's... Okay, it says Aries is one of the constellations of it's a cardinal sign, which means it's a leader sign, okay? This is the cross of God the Father, and therefore of the incarnating monad, M-O-N-A-D. It is an expression of will or power as it expresses itself through the great creative process. See? So it's just the first manifestation of that creation or creative energy. That's what it is. No, what I need is my magnifying glass. That's what that is.
That website is spiritweb.org, and then you get to log in from there. It's a free login to sign up for, so you can't use that whole big long.
That whole big long, okay.
Right, so you have to go to spiritweb.org, and you got to work your way through it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and get it because it's some good information on that.
Okay.
And I don't have any. I have copies of some of the other stuff here though, and I got a whole big old thing on Aries, as a matter of fact. But so yeah, so then we go back to putting up that altar. Okay, we're talking about the incense, which represents the air element. Okay. And then the next one and then it says incense with a scent corresponding to the purpose of your ritual. A holder for the stick incense, or a bowl of sand for charcoal and powdered incense. Okay, so I'm just giving you some items for your altar. Okay, and with whatever element is represented. Then fire You know, that's the candles. Okay? On your altar, you normally want to use like 3 candles. Okay? 3 candles, astrologically oriented for you or the person for whom you are doing the spell. Colored candle representing the purpose of the spell. A white guardian candle as a large or larger than the other 2. A holder for the candles, matches or lighter. Okay? These are the objects that you want to have gathered around your altar. Okay? And then for water, blessing oil for the blessing for blessing your table surface, oil for dressing the candles, astrological and magical purpose, bath crystals or oils. Okay? That represents water. Me, I have 2 basins of water on mine, sitting on 2 sides, representing balance. Okay? And you can do what you call an ancestral altar, because my mother and my father had passed over. So I use items that belong to them. I have some goblets that belong to my mother, to hold my water. That's what you call an ancestral. And then I have a candle holder that belonged to my father on my altar.
Okay, because I have an altar,
Okay.
and I've had it for years, and the spirit had told me one day to set up an altar.
Absolutely.
So with what I have on mine is like 2 little small lanterns with the oil, and I have the
Wonderful.
red oil
Right.
in it. And so I thought that was interesting when you were
Right.
saying the water.
Right.
And you know, when you do things and you don't have the full understanding. So now that I'm listening to you, now
You're
I
getting
have
some
the
understanding. But see,
understanding.
you're doing good because you're listening to your spirit, see.
Mhm.
And that's the best guide of all. All I can do is give you the tools, but your spirit is going to guide you.
Right.
It's going to be the one that you have to listen to, okay? And it will tell. I've had my spirit literally almost pull me in there to do a ritual. I'm like, what? And it's not till I'm in there doing it that I understand why I'm doing it, see?
Right.
But, and they'll start getting frisky. You'll start, the more you use your altar, the more you'll start acknowledging those spirits. They'll be making their presence known. So don't get afraid. It's not anything to be afraid of. It's just accessing that information, that energy.
I have an altar, and I have incense and water. I have water and oil in the water.
Okay.
Different types of oils that I put in the water,
Mm-hmm.
and I have pictures. Of
Wonderful. See,
pictures,
it's all about.
and I have dolls represent ideas.
Okay. See, your spirit. Each one, just like I said about Aquarians, we got to find our own individual path. Religion, that's where it's making this mistake. It's trying to tell a group of people how to be spiritual. And that's something your own spirit has to
And
tell
how
you.
to pray.
It will do that. And see, it has been doing that all the time. But like I told them, I went to the store, my spirits, I was walking out and said, get some light bulbs. Nah, I ain't getting no light bulbs. I'm not going back and getting no light. Sure enough, I walk in the house, all my lights blew out. The ones that are permanent wouldn't come on, okay? So things like that happen. Your first instinct, your first, that's your spirit. Usually, if it's not an emotional state, say I lost some money and I'm feeling all down and out. That's emotions, or I got some money and I'm feeling all good. That's emotions. But if you just feel good and there's no reason, no apparent reason, that's your spirit. If you just feel funny about something and there's no apparent reason, that's your spirit. Listen. We would avoid a lot of problems if we'd have listened to our spirit, But we don't know how to differentiate between our emotions and our spirit. And this is what this is all about, learning how to tell the difference.
But aren't they somehow, in some way, in some shape, linked together in some capacity?
Not if you're not using it in a spiritual sense. See? Remember, there's a duality always going on. So if you're using your emotions,
But aren't you feeling a spirituality within yourself, and isn't your spirituality a part of what you're feeling?
If that's what you are feeling, if it's a spiritual thing, it could be a desire.
Okay.
That's an emotion that is not a spiritual thing. Okay? That's a physical. So that is our trick, is to learn how to understand when is it our emotions saying something and when is it our spirit is saying something. Because yes, they do operate, like I just said, fire for Mother Earth, passion for us. You know, you got to learn how to understand how to make that jump from what is physical and what is spiritual.
Yeah.
See, when am I using a spiritual fire and when am I using a physical fire? You understand? You know, you may feel passion, you know, for, like I said, passion for the sex you're talking about, you know. But then again, you may feel passion to help be a peacemaker. Then you know you're using it spiritually because you're using it with its opposite. See, making it whole, complete. It's not spiritual unless it's whole. See, anytime you use anything in fragments, then it's not. Then it's a physical thing. So that could be a test.
I had some sex that's been spiritually uplifting, though.
Absolutely. That's one of the main ways of accessing that realm. It is.
You wish where no man been before.
Oh yeah, that is the best way. That is one of the best ways of accessing that realm. And then water. Oh, we did water. Earth. Picture, image. They have tarot cards. If the picture is one that you wish to keep, it would be wise to get a copy of it made.
At 9:30, that was Kevin. At
Oh,
9:30.
okay. Okay.
I use a plant for Earth.
The plant, earth, you know, flowers, anything. I go out there, I got acorns, you know. See, because I got a vortex in my backyard, you guys. And I go out there and I get stuff out of that vortex area. And man, and anytime you see anything do anything circular, that's spiritual. Okay?
Okay, so say like you step outside and the wind is like blowing the leaves in a circular. Okay.
Spiritual. Okay? Nature. Remember what he said? Nature was how the Egyptians got in contact with the spirit. They watched nature. That's what we have to do too. We have to go back. A bird wake you up in the morning, there's a message there. Okay?
Okay, so the Indians and the Egyptians.
The spiritual, yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah, you can see that.
They know because they deceived us with the Egyptians to having us to think that the Egyptians were into the Charleston Heston movie.
Right. And
I'm
I was going to do this one on.
But that's true too. They've said they've oftentimes.
Oh, I just saw a movie not too long ago where they showed where it was called the Black Hole.
They say that the Egyptians just evil.
No. Oh, sure, because
they're going to tell you everything in its opposites, you guys, because we are opposites. Okay? And what is good for us is bad for them, and vice versa.
That's right.
So that's why we're always going to get.
good for them and bad for us.
Yeah, you know, so. Oh, I got some stuff here for y'all. We didn't even get to have the stuff I wanted. Yeah, so, but, now where is that? Because I had a whole thing. Yeah, that's what they said. They don't want you to do any voodoo.
On the site.
And they're doing it. They're doing these things.
I put one Jew in his face.
They're taking what our ancestors gave to
and
us.
using it.
Told us that it was wrong.
Right.
That we were casting spells.
That's right.
But in actuality, we're doing spiritual rituals
right.
to get in contact.
And in the meantime, they're using the hell out of it.
They're using the hell out of it.
They're working those
Basements
things.
of their house.
They're working it, you know. And the problem is, they don't even have the power without us. We have to participate with them in order for them to be able to do it. And, you know, they don't have any power. We are the watchdog. This is what I was going to read you about. We're talking about the Indians. Let me start off. We are the Aborigines, the dark-skinned, bushy-haired original inhabitants, the so-called North and South America. We have been referred to as the pre-Columbian civilization, the prehistoric, mound builders, all of this certified. It says the Washita, and we are the Imperial Washita nation of mound builders, Moors, akin to the Moors of the Northwest Africa. The Moors built the highly advanced geometric earthworks and sacred burial mounds found all over this continent. Okay, the Wachita and Tunica families carry the imperial bloodline. After the American came into our land, these names were altered to Washington and Turner. They also changed the spelling of Washita to Yeah, Ouachita, a European misnomer that retains the pronunciation of the original name. Several derivatives of Ouachita appear, such as Wichita, Kansas. The term Ouachita has come to mean ancient ones, or the black man, okay? Clearly printed as the original maps of the Spanish land grants, the river named Rio Negro, River of the Blacks, is simultaneously labeled Rio Achawa, River of the Ouachita. Okay, we built the first pyramids on the earth to align the planet. Our people built great civilizations all over the world, including Asia and the said North and South America. In fact, the largest stone pyramid in the world is not found in Egypt, but in China. Okay, its four sides were painted red, yellow, and green and black. These are the same colors of the Imperial Ouachita flag. It is a well-kept secret that the Midwest America, the heartland, where I come from, was once occupied by a highly civilized pyramid mound building culture. The Ouachita Moors are the remnants of those glorious people. The word pyramid is derived from the Greek term pyra for fire and mid for center. In the center of the Ouachita flag is a pyramid mound that has had its four sides peeled open. From the base of this pyramid mound shines a bright yellow color like the light of the burning sun, Ra, the corn, and the fountain of youth. Okay? On April 5th, 1909, front page headline of the Phoenix Gazette newspaper featured the report from a recently discovered Egyptian city found in a vaulted chamber nearly a mile deep within the caves of the Grand Canyon. Although the Smithsonian Institute would try to totally deny this well-documented fact, it carried out an extensive excavation of this site and others that tie the ancient people of this place and pyramid to the great civilizations along the Nile, the Niger, the Mississippi, the Amazon. The civilization that built this citadel in the Grand Canyon can be directly traced to the time of Ramses and the Valley of the Kings on the west bank of the Nile. Okay? Even today, certain areas of the Grand Canyon possess Egyptian and Oriental names such as the Temple of Horus, Isis, Osiris, and Buddha. Okay? Understand, you guys, or overstand, you guys. It says research is research thousands of years before the arrival of any Asian migrants or barbarian invaders. The so-called red population of the Western Hemisphere are our honored brothers and sisters who emerged from the empire. The names Blackfoot, Tar Heels are examples of lucrative attempts to hide the true identity of our people. Other names used to divide indigenous people are Creeks, Cherokees, Hopi, all the names, the Moors, the Mohawks, Navajo. We are indigenous, not Indians. By accepting the false label Indian, the origin of some of our people was psychologically removed from this land into India. Okay? Today, most so-called African Americans can trace some lineage to an often misunderstood and misplaced Indian ancestry or European bloodline. Most people who consider themselves white Americans can recall the stories in their own family closets that ties them to a colored ancestry. We are all the result of the indigenous people mixing with the Asians and the Europeans who arrived much later. The world dare not discuss Professor John Henry Clark's observation of the European imperialist policy of conquer by bastardization. This so-called for the genocide of all the men, then bastardizing the race by raping the defenseless women. We have seen this most recently with the Bostonian atrocities of ethnic cleansing. Okay, so just understand that too, guys. That the reason, the Indians or the indigenous people, they've been, that's because they've been mixed with the.
Could you just read that for one? You said Dr. Clark.
John Henry Clark.
John Henry Clark.
It was right
Breaking
after
the
that.
European identity.
Okay.
What was it?
It says, The world dare not discuss Professor John Henry Clark's observation of the European imperialist policy of conquer by bastardization. This called for the genocide of all the men, then bastardizing the race by raping the defenseless women. We have seen this most recently, when I was
He's doing it now.
Yeah, it says there are thousands of women were ordered to be raped, not murdered like the men, and impregnated by the conquering
Spanish and Portuguese.
yeah, Western the historians have tried to hide the true identity of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Okay? So, you know, just like Emiola was saying, you know, we were already here.
Already here.
Already here.
That's why they put it the African American trip to keep us further.
You're welcome.
In
Thank
the
you.
gut.
Thank you all
Keep
for
us in the
coming.
gut. I'm African American. I know that, man.
And come back next week, the fifth week, and we really didn't cover a lot of what we were going to cover today, but if you see by your agenda, today we're supposed to call building an altar and tools, and then week 5 we're going to be tuning in. So we're going to talk more about the ancestors, astrology, numerology, the tarot cards, the pendulums, the dreams, the first eye, all those tools that we use to tune in, okay? That's what we'll be discussing next week. And then we'll go into the deities of the underworld who we need to identify with. Magic?
You didn't know that, did you?
They should have a copy here, maybe.
Oh, that's stuff
This shouldn't be that difficult to find. Any metaphysical bookstore should
Where
be
this
one of
submarine base go in the water and got a dolphin tell them what to do and where to go.
that. Which one?
What's the name? You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
There's something.
Only thing I can do is I can make copies and bring next week and bring some back.
Okay.
I have other copies here, you know, if you guys want to go through the, because, and it spells out all this that I'm talking about, you know, especially the ones about Saturn. You need to understand our connection with Saturn, okay? Because that definitely is our power and our energy. These are the ones about Saturn. This will tell you about the planet Venus. Goes on down. It's just use it.
I wanted to ask you one question for you.
It's just a whole bunch of it, you know, that we just, and all of it is just a kind of a validation of most of what I've been talking about here.
Don't ever people worry. Because I might say always asking for, do you believe young man? Or you know young man. You got to say, I know him.
Oh yeah, I must definitely say that.
Believe is a belief system, wishy-washy. If or are. Get that one.
You know, there's some material down here, not so specifically of Pisces, but it'll go into about all, you know, the different, oh, you know what I did bring? I didn't make copies, but it's going to identify the other signs too. No, the only one, I just had the Aries as far as the signs.
So we're using them, right? He told me I'm going to find a dictionary.
Y'all close now, right? Y'all close on Saturday?
No, Saturday open, Sunday we're not. So Saturday we'll be
From 1 to 6.
Let me see you.
we're all some kind of way.
Where you putting that?